So not gonna lie, both Phantom Liberty and Patch 2.0 are kinda blowing me away for Cyberpunk 2077. Not because they're good, I honestly always thought they'd be good, but they're a much larger success than I think most people, myself included, were expecting. As this weekend, Cyberpunk 2077 had 274,000 people playing it at the same time on Steam. This is a player count that we have not seen for this game since the month it came out. Before October 1st, the last time 274,000 people were playing Cyberpunk 2077 was December of 2020, nearly 3 years ago. So now we have a situation where a 3-year-old, nearly ancient game by gaming terms, with one of the most controversial releases in gaming history, is hitting player counts that it hasn't had since the month of release. That is absolutely insane. Like, yeah, remember when things with Cyberpunk 2077 went crazy again around the release of Edgerunners? We even got a tweet from CDPR describing how there were over 1 million players playing this game each and every day. During that time, we only hit 136,000 concurrent players on Steam. So now we are quite literally doing more than double that. And when you start to look at some of the hard details, it only gets better for CD Projekt Red. Phantom Liberty is a huge success from the player count perspective, but it's also been a massive critical success. Phantom Liberty got tons of praise from critic reviews, some of which call it the best expansion for a video game that they've ever played, but more importantly, fans are loving Phantom Liberty, with 88% of its reviews on Steam being positive right now. And this even extended to Cyberpunk 2077 itself, with the recent reviews on Steam shooting up to 87% positive. Patch 2.0 is definitely putting in some legwork with the rest of the audience, even outside of those who have bought the expansion. And I think we've reached the point now where I can officially say it. Cyberpunk 2077 is the greatest comeback story in gaming history. The game had a truly disastrous launch, and unfortunately, at the time, it wasn't even all that uncommon to have this disastrous of a launch. But while some of the other devs out there just flat out abandoned their games after that launch, or even started to fix things but then largely moved on before the fixing job was done, and among them, CD Projekt Red was the standout. They've stuck with Cyberpunk 2077 unlike any other developer I have seen, and now almost 3 years later, it is truly one of the best games to release this generation, at least for a lot of players. And one of the funny parts about this all is, along the way, Cyberpunk 2077 also just kind of became one of the best looking games out there. I'm not really sure if we have Nvidia or CDPR to thank for this, but some of the visual enhancements to come to Cyberpunk have made this game shockingly well optimized while also looking incredible. Like right now, I could run around Night City getting 120 FPS thanks to DLSS 3.5, but still have full path tracing on with things looking ridiculously good. This is a 3-year-old game. It shouldn't look this good, and it shouldn't look this much better than most of the other games coming out around right now. And I think one of the biggest points of praise we should levy towards CDPR is giving their devs the time to fix these things. Now, releasing your expansion and this massive revamp of the game with patch 2.0 until 3 years after release is a super risky move. I mean, honestly, ask yourself, around the release of Cyberpunk 2077, would you honestly predict that people would still be interested in buying more content for this game 3 years later? And that content is coming out just a few weeks after Bethesda releases their next major RPG? Honestly, I think taking their time with both the expansion and patch 2.0 really benefited consumers, but it definitely was a risky move by CDPR that paid off in a major way because both of these are incredible. But don't worry, because they're not even stopping here. A few days ago, CDPR released a list of upcoming changes that are going to be dropping with patch 2.01 for Cyberpunk, and some of these changes are pretty big and important. There is a bug where you could fall through the elevator floors while playing the heist at low FPS. So on one hand, that's hilarious, definitely not the introduction to the game a lot of players should be having. Another pretty big issue, the UI showing controller inputs bug is getting fixed. I've encountered this one a few times on PC, where after loading into the game, all of the icons show up as if I'm playing with a controller despite having no controller plugged in. With patch 2.01, you will be able to once again switch to ARM cyberware while cycling through your weapons, which is a really handy change. Vehicle radios are going to be a bit louder, so you could properly hear them while driving around. There's going to be some performance boosts for the game overall, but specifically targeting Dogtown, which is very good to hear. I really do think Dogtown is one of the best looking districts in Night City, and it'll be great if it actually feels a bit better with us getting some extra FPS in that district. But perhaps most important of all, the corrupt save problem on PlayStation is going to be solved. This was a rough one, where basically save files on PlayStation were hitting the save file limit and thus corrupting, so then it was just gone. You can reload an earlier save that didn't hit the limit and thus didn't corrupt, but once a save was corrupted, there is no recovery. And even with this update, it'll increase the limit, so hopefully the corruptions stop occurring, but if your save was already corrupted, you're doomed. You either have to reload something earlier or just start over. Interestingly enough, this was actually the exact same issue that Skyrim had on the PS3 back in the day, and this is just a sample of some of the fixes that are coming. It seems like some other, perhaps smaller fixes and improvements will also be coming along with these larger ones. So on one hand, great news that this new update is going to be dropping. Patch 2.0 is not the end for Cyberpunk 2077, and that may even be true in more ways than one, as we have also just recently heard from the Cyberpunk game director that there are plans to do a little something more with this game. And now, before you get too excited, this is nothing on the scale of Patch 2.0 or Phantom Liberty. Cyberpunk 2077 is not getting another expansion, but smaller updates are definitely coming. So on one hand, back up your mods, and then two, maybe some of those more annoying features will still be fixed in the future. And right now, CDPR is likely going through a transition as development on Cyberpunk 2, otherwise known as Orion, is going to begin ramping up as confirmed by the game director as well. And in just a couple of days, we're going to be getting a lot more information on all of this. On October 5th, CDPR is streaming their own Investor Day. And as opposed to some of the earnings call streams, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, this is actually going to be a multi-segmented panel discussion with a bunch of devs getting involved. There's going to be 3 panels in total, each of these being around 1 hour long. We'll get some insights into the production of Phantom Liberty and the transition to Red 2.0. This is CDPR's plan to develop 2 AAA titles at once. They're actually doing this already, with the new Witcher game and Phantom Liberty being developed in tandem. But now, as we start to see Phantom Liberty wrap things up, they are going to transition to developing the Witcher game and the Cyberpunk sequel at the same time. So with that in mind, I wouldn't be shocked if we at least get a mention of the Cyberpunk sequel here, and perhaps some timelines as far as building out this new CDPR studio that they are designing. There's going to be a look into game and tech insights around Phantom Liberty, featuring some very notable devs like Pal Sasko will be here. I'm really excited for this one. Phantom Liberty is visually very impressive. It really is Cyberpunk at its best on multiple fronts, including visually, and finding out how exactly that was made possible should be cool and interesting. Plus, hearing more from Pal Sasko is always a good thing. And finally, some of the business highlights from Phantom Liberty's launch will be shared, likely giving us a more direct look at how big of a win this really was for CDPR financially. Hopefully we get some concrete sales numbers and perhaps even a sales update on Cyberpunk overall. So make sure to get subscribed, because I'll be covering whatever CDPR talks about here in detail. And overall, it really feels great to just finally arrive here. It feels like for years now, we have been seeing Cyberpunk 2077 take leaps towards redemption as major updates and fixes were shipped, but it was really with Phantom Liberty and Patch 2.0 that got us over that finish line to turn Cyberpunk 2077 into a truly great game that just about everyone can recommend now. I mean, even as you just look at Patch 2.0, the fact that they went back and revamped a ton of the miscellaneous things about the game's core story, or just to try and make the experience a bit better and more enjoyable, really feels like the devs went out of their way to make sure this was better. Like while playing Patch 2.0, it feels like there were developers who were actually playing Cyberpunk and were like, okay, I think this could be a bit better. I think this could be a bit more fun or interesting, and then going back and making those changes, which is awesome. This isn't a haphazard Patch 2.0, this really was a fundamental overhaul. And as I mentioned earlier, it really feels like the executives at CDPR did learn from the mistakes around release. They were able to greenlight an expansion coming to the game 3 years after the release, as well as devote the manpower to being able to get a 2.0 update. Like, they definitely could have just left a lot of those core systems as they were. The perk and skill tree was fine, it didn't need to be completely overhauled, but they invested in that because they wanted to make it a better game, and I definitely respect that, even despite what happened around launch. And a big point of comparison that's popped up with all of this is Starfield. I personally thought it was really questionable from CDPR to be dropping Phantom Liberty just a few weeks after Starfield's release, mainly because I thought Cyberpunk wouldn't get the time of day it deserved, it would be overshadowed by Starfield, but instead it almost seems like the opposite is happening. It's almost like if these professional game developers know a lot more than I do, because as of right now, Cyberpunk 2077 has over 100,000 more players on Steam than Starfield, and even by comparison, Starfield's review scores on Steam have been slowly declining while we've seen Cyberpunk slowly increasing over the past couple of years, and especially as of late. And there definitely is a Phantom Liberty effect going on here. Phantom Liberty and Cyberpunk 2077 in general were so good that it does seem like it is souring Starfield for some players. And I mean, this even happened to me to a degree. I began my Phantom Liberty review right in the midst of Starfield coverage, but Phantom Liberty totally sucked me in, to the point where I actually started to change some of my content plans as I was playing through Phantom Liberty and patch 2.0 and realizing how good they actually were. Instead of being relegated to the side story, it feels like Phantom Liberty has taken the main stage by storm. And of course, all the while, Baldur's Gate 3 is just casually sitting on top as a true masterpiece. And at the end of the day, regardless of what you think of any of these games, we have had one of the best 3-month periods in gaming ever. If you're an RPG fan, you have tons of incredible games at your disposal, and I hope you're enjoying at least one of them. And hey, maybe you want to celebrate that. Well, you can with today's video sponsor, Displate. They just dropped a ton of new Phantom Liberty themed displates to add to their massive catalog of existing Cyberpunk options. And right now is actually a really good time to pick one up, as their Collector's Fest sale is ongoing, where you could save up to 37% off your order, and this all comes to an end tomorrow, so act fast if you're interested. There are a ton of limited time releases available right now, so make sure you don't miss out. But otherwise, check out this video where I detail some of the other insane updates around Cyberpunk 2077's massive unsolved FF06B5 mystery.